Hi guys, welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to talk about horror movies, which are some of my favorite types of movies, and it is Halloween time, and that is my favorite time of year. So today I'm going to talk about 5 movies that are supposedly based on a true story that I'm going to kind of show are not really based on the true story. So the first movie I'm going to talk about is Amityville Horror. You've probably seen it, if not the original, then the remake with Ryan Reynolds. The original had James Brolin? Yeah, James, not Josh. James Brolin. The original. Brolin. And it's basically about a family that moves into a house on a lake or river. River, maybe. And it's a spooky house, but, you know, it's a great deal. They move in, they like it, and then scary things start happening. Blood coming out of the walls, and, you know, it turns out there was some kind of torture chamber underneath the house, and blah, 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 blah. Alright, now, the true story, the movie's about the Lutz family, which moves in after a crime happens. The house was vacated because apparently a man killed his whole family in the house, and the story goes in the movie and also the book that was written about it. Most of these movies that are based on a true story are based on a novel, which is based on a true story. So in the story goes that the man was hearing, you know, the devil and spirits, and they sort of possessed him to kill his entire family. The actual story is about a 23-year-old man named Robert DeFeo Jr. And in 1974, he killed his father, his mother, his 18-year-old sister, and then 3 other siblings, 2 brothers and 1 other sister. It happened on 112 Ocean View Avenue, Amityville, Long Island, New York. So it did happen in Amityville. It was in Long Island, and he supposedly killed them with a .35 caliber lever action Marlin 336 C rifle at around 3 a.m. on November 13th, but he didn't report it until 6:30 p.m. that day. So he killed his family 3 in the morning, you know, showered, went to work, came back home from work, and then ran to, I think it was a bar, and said, "My whole family's been killed." And originally, he said that it was a mob hit. He said that it must have been a hitman sent by the mob to kill his family. Apparently, the family did have connections to some kind of mob or criminal organization, syndicate kind of thing. So the police actually kind of bought that for a couple days. You know, they bought that for a little while. But then he ended up confessing to the crime and presented evidence of his crime and what happened. The weird part is, you know, he was declared, or he not declared insane, but he said I was insane during confessing, that he was hearing voices and the voices told him to do it. But it turns out it's not actually ghosts or spirits. It was just a crazy guy. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He changed his story throughout the years. He's still alive, still serving 6 life sentences in Greenhaven Correctional Facility in New York. His insanity defense was that he was on heroin, LSD, and had an antisocial disorder, personality disorder. And his psychiatrist said it's possible he had schizophrenia as well. And they don't know a motive. They said it's possible that he did it for life insurance money. And, you know, it's just really strange. He changed his stories throughout the years, said his sister, who was 18 at the time and died, did it. And that he killed her in a struggle with the gun, even though her body was found face down in bed like all the other bodies at the house. And then he said his uncle, who had connections to the mob, did it. He said a stranger did it. He's changed his stories throughout, you know, his time in jail trying to get off for this crime. Every time he's been up for parole, it has been denied. So this story, while it is kind of creepy and it is kind of scary, and the actual movie is about the family that moved in after this crime, and how they left the house because of you know, paranormal activity, because of, you know, things they heard and saw at the house. That has been disputed throughout the years, and it's largely thought to have been false, and that this guy was just a crazy guy who killed his whole family. So, the next movie I'm going to talk about is The Hills Have Eyes. It is one of my favorite movies. I originally watched the remake of it, and then went, and this is, you know, years ago, probably like 7, 8 years ago. Originally watched the remake of it, and probably when it first came out on DVD, and then went back and watched the original, and then later the sequel. And, you know, I really liked this movie. I like the idea of being trapped, but in an open area. It takes place in the Nevada desert, and it's about a bunch of mutated cannibals that live in the hills that, you know, watch you from afar, and then, you know, mess with your shit, and then take you and kill you, and yeah, it was scary. And then the second one after the remake, I don't know if the first one had any sequels, but the second one after the remake was about a bunch of military people that were on a training mission in Nevada, and they come across this group of cannibals, this family, and turns out they're incestuous, and they, you know, want to take the females to make more babies, and they want to kill the males and eat them because they're cannibals and they're crazy and blah 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 blah. So this story has a really cool backstory, really cool basis in reality, kind of. So this movie is, and book also, is based off of a 15th or 16th century semi-mythical clan of cannibals, led by a man named Alexander Sawney Bean. Sawney, nickname Sawney Bean. He reportedly, the whole family reportedly executed and cannibalized over 1,000 people in Scotland, in the hills of Scotland. So what happened was, this man was antisocial, didn't want to work for a living, didn't want to make an honest way about it, and he met this woman who I suppose felt the same way about him and also didn't want to work. So they fled town, moved far away to these rocky cliffs on the ocean, and found this cave that was, you know, really remote and deep, and no one really went there. And so they started a family and ended up having 8 sons, 6 daughters, 18 grandsons, and 14 granddaughters. Many of those were the product of incest. And the way these people went about making their living was ambushing people at night, who would go by the road by where they lived, and killing them and robbing them and eating them. And they're very secretive, said to have been undiscovered for over 25 years, and it's near the town of Girvan, Scotland. I don't know if that's still a town or if it's called something else. That's just what Wikipedia says. All of my information's from Wikipedia, so take it for what it is, but you know, it has sources, so. The townspeople were out looking for these cannibals, or the people that were, you know, taking these folks from the road. No one knew who they were or what they were doing with them. So they, you know, they went out looking for them. They found the cave that they lived in, but they were like, this is such a damp, dark, deep cave. You know, it's so hard to get to. There's no way anyone could live here without us knowing about it. So they didn't go into the cave. So they ended up lynching some innocent people, accusing them of the crimes that had happened, believing them to be the murderers. But then one day, after a failed ambush of a man and a woman, the woman was killed. The man was able to leave and bring back a mob to get the people. The entire Sawney Bean clan was captured and killed, and it's actually, you know, according to this Wikipedia thing, it's really kind of brutal. They discovered them and executed them without a trial. The men had their genitals cut off and their hands and feet severed and were forced to bleed to death, whereas the women had to watch them bleed to death and then were burned at the stake, basically. This is all a horrible, horrible story. It sounds awful, right? But it turns out also probably not true. It's most likely anti-Scottish propaganda. Yeah, at the time, 15th, 16th century, the Brits and the Scots did not get along at all. The Scots were viewed by the Brits as barbarians, as savages, as crazy people, so this story fits right into their sort of telling of how Scottish people behave, not only with how the cannibals behaved, but also how the townspeople and their justice system worked. It is just brutal. And I'm not saying the British people are any better. They got some brutal stuff in their past. I've been to the Tower of London. Let me tell you, it's pretty crazy what they did. But anyways, so historians kind of doubt this actual story. They think it was, propaganda that was published in some magazine, some newspaper at the time, and it became this sort of snowball effect of like, oh, did you hear about that clan? Oh, kind of like rumor milled down to, to people believing that it was true, when in fact it most likely wasn't true. There's no historical documentation of this ever taking place. There's no, they don't even know what century it takes place. Some reports say 15th century, some reports say 16th century, and, back then, they weren't great at keeping records, but they were good enough to know, whether it happened, 100 years apart from one another. But, so there's also two other similar stories of cannibals in Scotland that have been proven false or most likely false, and so that's why historians don't think that this actually happened. They think it was just a pretty detailed story that spiraled out of control, and people started believing it. And then, you've got a couple hundred years later, you got a movie made out of it. So there you go. So the next movie I'm going to talk about is Open Water, and I just realized now that I actually have two shark movies on this. I got Jaws in a minute, yeah, I like sharks. I like shark movies, and this movie stuck with me when I first watched it, when it first came out, and because of the helplessness of the people involved and just how crazy that would be. It's not, there's no benevolent forces, there's no there's no paranormal activity. There's no, nothing going on. It's just, it's ignorant, or not ignorance, it's, well, I'll tell you the story. Alright, so in the movie, you've got two, scuba divers. They're going on a scuba trip, and, they're young, they're in love, and, all that, and, so they go down, and, they don't come back up before the ship leaves, and because they were each other's buddy, because they got like a buddy system on this thing, the ship doesn't realize that they weren't there because they were both gone, so neither of them were there to tell them that they weren't there, and the ship didn't find out until days later that they were actually gone. I don't know if that's in the movie or not, but and then so these people, they're trapped out in the middle of the ocean. They don't know which way is land. There's no one out there to help them. There's no planes, there's no boats nearby. They're just floating in the water with their scuba gear, and that's it. They don't have floaties, they don't have a boat, they've got nothing but each other. It's a married couple. And then the sharks start coming, and they start swarming, and they start biting at them, and they're feeling hopeless, and eventually they get eaten by sharks. Well, at least the husband gets eaten by sharks. I remember at the end, the woman just sort of falls under the water, and I don't know if she drowns or if she sacrificed herself to the shark. She didn't want to wait any longer. That's, yeah, it ends up being a shark movie. And what was really cool about the filming of the movie, I remember seeing at the time, was they used real sharks. They baited real sharks and put the actors in with those real sharks. They weren't large sharks, and they weren't man-eating sharks, and they had the proper precautions, but I thought that was really cool that they used real sharks, so you could tell it's not CG or animatronics in the movie. So the real story took place in Australia, off of the Great Barrier Reef. And it was about an American couple, Tom and Eileen Longren, from Louisiana. They were mistakenly left in the Coral Sea off of the Great Barrier Reef on January 25th, 1998. And they were never found. So the whole part about there being sharks and the sharks terrorizing them for, days and killing them in the end, That part is completely made up, as far as we know, because their bodies were never found, and there's no evidence that they died of a shark attack. They could have drowned, or died of dehydration and exhaustion. It wasn't until 2 days later that they were discovered to be missing. The shipboat captain did not... Did I say shipboat captain? The ship captain, or boat captain, didn't realize that they were even missing. He never reported it. It wasn't until they were about to check out from the hotel, and the hotel's like, where are they? And then they trace it back to the expedition, the scuba expedition, and realized that they had been left at sea. So they searched for 3 days by boat and plane. They couldn't find them. But then they did find a diver's slate, which I don't know what that is, but you can Google it, I'm sure. But on the diver's slate was written, you know what I think it is? I think it's those things that divers write on so that they can communicate with each other, like hold it up and like that. Perhaps. So they wrote on it Monday, January 26th, 1998. This is the day after they were abandoned, was on the 25th. 08 a.m. To anyone who can help us, we have been abandoned on Agincourt Reef by MV Outer Edge, 25 Jan 98, 3 p.m. Please help us. Come to rescue us before we die. Help, with 3 exclamation points after help. So it's, kind of a tragic story when you think about it. It's not really a movie I would have chosen to make a movie out of. But what happens after is kind of a little bit interesting. It's not included in the movie. People speculated whether or not it was a suicide, a joint suicide, a murder-suicide, whether they were faking their deaths and are still alive to this day, which is both have been proven pretty unlikely. The only reason they thought it was a suicide was because of the husband, Tom's diary entries, which on one of them might have indicated that he was depressed or suicidal. But the woman was never indicated as suicidal. The family disagrees with that. Yeah, it's very unlikely that they were either faking their deaths or killing themselves, or he killed himself and his wife. It's very unlikely that either of those scenarios happened. So the skipper was charged with unlawful killing and found not guilty, but the company was found guilty of negligence and had to pay a fine. Actually, they pled guilty, so they knew what they did was wrong. I think, in my opinion, someone should have gone to jail for that, but that's just me. Alright, so our next story is Psycho, or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, or a film from 1974 called Deranged, or the Outlast video game. Take your pick. And if you haven't guessed who this one is about, then you don't know your serial killer history, my friend. This is about Ed Gein. So if you haven't heard of Ed Gein, he was a serial killer in Wisconsin in the 50s. I don't know if you'd classify him as a serial killer now. He was only ever convicted or known to have killed 2 women. But what he did do with those women and with bodies that he dug up from the nearby cemeteries makes him sort of stand out among one of the most disturbed individuals in American criminal history. He made things out of people's bodies, and that's what inspired certain parts of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Psycho and Buffalo Bill, was that he was so obsessed with his mother that he wanted to become her at times. He made a bodysuit, he made a corset, he made leggings, he made a face mask, he made a belt, all out of parts of human bodies, female human bodies. I've got a little list here, and it's disturbing. It was so disturbing at the time that after they took the crime photos and logged them into evidence, they burned the photos because they didn't want those getting out to the people because they were disturbing. So he made a trash can out of human skin. He made chair covers out of human skin. He made a bowl out of skulls. A corset made from a human torso. Leggings, a mask made from the skin of people. there's a heart in the saucepan when they arrested him, so implying that he was not only killing these people and skinning them, but also eating parts of their body. There's a belt made out of female nipples. Lips, this one I found the most disturbing. Lips on a window shade drawstring. It's just, I don't even know. And a lampshade with a human face on it. So yeah, this man was quite disturbed. He confessed to killing 2 women who reminded him of his mother, one of which was an owner of, I think, a hardware store. And that's the murder that he was charged with and later convicted of. But he was found mentally ill, schizophrenic, tried for murder, and committed to a mental institution because he was found mentally ill. And he didn't die till 1984, which I didn't even know. I didn't know that he was in jail that entire time, but he died of lung cancer. So he's supposed to have robbed over 9 different graves, and then killed the 2 women. Yeah, he's just a real sick son of a bitch. And there's been countless movies either inspired by him or directly about his story. You can look those up on Wikipedia or IMDb or something like that. Alright, so the last film I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite films and books of all time. I'm going to talk about Jaws. I've read the book. I have seen the movie probably hundreds of times. Maybe not hundreds, but many, many, many times. And I named my dog Quint after Captain Sam Quint in the movie and the book. I like him better in the book. He's, I think, a better guy in the book and has a better death scene. So you should read the book. It's different than the movie. It's a lot different. Hooper's a totally different character, and different people die. It doesn't happen in the same way that it happens in the movie. The movie is based off of Peter Benchley book. So it was originally inspired by a, according to Peter Benchley, the novel, a 4,550-pound great white shark which was caught off of Long Island, I'm guessing in the 60s or 70s, around the time he wrote the book. But he also said it lends inspiration from a 1916 incident along the Jersey Shore where 5 people were attacked by supposedly 1 or more sharks at the time. It was between July 1st and July 12th of 1916. 4 people were killed, 1 person was injured, and is now believed, well, I'll get to that part in a minute. But what was interesting that I didn't know, scientists at the time, because this is, 1916, it was the beginning of people swimming for fun. Beach destinations were becoming popular for the first time around the turn of the century, and there wasn't a whole lot of marine biological research being done, because there was really no need to. But scientists at the time didn't think that sharks would attack a person unprovoked. They thought shark attacks only happened to people who fucked with sharks. So they were proven wrong during this, 2-week stretch here. The first attack happened, and the beaches did remain open. Happened off Long Island, and just like in the book and in the movie, the beaches remained open, and more attacks ended up happening. And what's interesting is, the first and second attack happened along the ocean. The third and fourth attack actually happened, and the fifth attack actually happened in a creek, miles from the ocean. It became a media sensation, and the creek was reported to be an 8-foot shark. And they also had reports of it being a juvenile great white, so not, the big shark like in the book and the movie. It was only 8 feet, so, only 8 feet, and it's still big. But it wasn't, 15 feet long and however many, it wasn't gigantic. It was a normal-sized shark for that time of year in that place. But it became a media sensation, so much so that Congress approved $5,000 to eradicate the Jersey Shore shark epidemic. They had the president talking to the cabinet about what they can do. There were newspaper reports across the country about these shark attacks, which, that never really happens nowadays. So you can kind of, compare it to, terrorism or Katrina or something. It was huge news at the time. So much so that the president got involved about a shark who only killed 4 people. Although I think 3 of them were young men, like boys. So, I mean, it was kind of shocking that, you know, in a creek that they were playing in, a shark could attack them there. But hundreds of sharks ended up being captured in what was described as the largest scale animal hunt in history. That was the quote from Wikipedia. I don't know if they mean American history or history, but I mean, you can imagine, just like in the movie Jaws, they all went out, they were all getting any shark they could get, any large fish they could get that could have killed these people. And this part I found the most interesting. At the time, it was suggested that it could have been a great white, could have been a Spanish shark, could have been a sandbar shark, or this one was the best. One scientist suggested that it could have been a sea turtle, that he had seen sea turtles that size that act very aggressively around people, and that it could have torn those people apart. Yeah. But scientists now, and at the time some of them, believed that it was most likely a bull shark. The reason why was because the creek was probably less salty than the ocean, and bull sharks have the ability to go into less salty or brackish water for food, and can stay in that water for some amount of time. It would fit the aggressiveness. The only thing unusual was it being that far north, but it's not unheard of. And so I just thought that was interesting that one of the scariest movies I saw when I was a kid and made me fear sharks and love sharks for, you know, the rest of my life, they got the shark wrong. It probably was a bull shark. And that's just really interesting. And yeah, so very similar to the book and the movie, but also very different. Also, you know, it was only 4 people died. So in 2 weeks. So that's, I mean, that's significant, but it's not completely rare. It's not completely unheard of. When you got people in the water, you might get bit by a shark. Happens. Alright guys, so those are the 5 movies, horror movies based off of true stories that may or may not have been completely true stories. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for my next video. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I hope you like it. And subscribe and comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye!